I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo Del Real here, along with my partner, colleague, friend, also an investor, Mr. Nick Hodge. He happens to be the publisher of Daily Profit Cycle and my co-host on our weekly therapy session that we like to call Investing in Bizarro World. This is our 227th session. We're going to talk markets. We're going to talk Jerome getting a little cover. We're going to talk gold looking cute again. We're going to talk silver doing what silver does. A lot to get into. Bear market, bull market, a lot to dissect. As always, Mr. Hodge, first and foremost, how are you today, sir? Hanging in there?
I'm doing good, Gerardo. It's one of those weeks where it's good to be a mining investor again. So we were smart this week. We'll see how long that lasts. How are you?
You beat me to the comment. We're all smart again for a couple of days, right? Although, look, again, in fairness, you and I, our subscribers for the most part, have had pretty good a pretty good run here the last couple of years. I mean, the speculative stuff has struggled along with all speculative stocks, but the non-speculative stocks in the junior space anyway that we deem the top picks for the most part here in the last year or two have performed really, really well. Patriot's the obvious one, but you were really early on Bravo Mining. We helped finance that at the 50 cent level, and that thing looks like it's on its way to $1 billion market cap. It sits at $500 million right now, trading at $5. So look, 10 times your money, 9 times your money in this market over the past year, given the volume and the price action for most of the venture exchange, really encouraging. And then let's start there. There's actually an uptick in volume, and hence the reason we all feel smart for a couple of days again. And price action in the venture exchange. The portfolio looks mostly green across the board. We did get a CPI number that we'll discuss here in just a second, and we'll dive into the overall indices here in the U.S. But let's start with the venture exchange this week because it's actually behaving like it wants to do something. Thoughts?
Well, you had a dollar that fell out of bed. When you got that CPI report, it went below 100 on the DXY, and things that priced in dollars then tend to go up. So you had oil back at 77 for the first time since April. You had copper rising towards $4, and globally, there's continues to be announcements and research reports about just how acute this battery metals shortage is going to be for all these automakers and battery plants that have been announced. So all that stuff combined, and there's also been some drill results. People that can actually drill where there's not fires during the summer season have been putting out results. So all those things combined, weak dollar, battery metal shortage announcements, and then results from companies mean that some of these quality companies have caught a bid over the past week or so, and the TSX has finally had a good couple of days. And it doesn't help that, and not just the copper price is going up, but the gold price as well, which you mentioned in the intro there, and that's a function of, again, the weakening dollar and softening bond yields, purportedly as a result of the CPI. Again, we'll see how long that lasts. The Fed meets here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, just to provide some context for those of you that aren't aware, there was a CPI report, which, somewhat mockingly measures inflation, right? It excludes food and gas and some of the other things that you kind of need to get by in civil society. But anyhow, that's a rant, right? I could go into that. But the CPI report came in with better than expected numbers, with inflation trending lower than expectations. And that, of course, leads to speculation that it'll give Jerome the opportunity to claim a victory on a soft landing potentially. And so the markets definitely believed it. Look, you mentioned the dollar. It fell below the 100 index, right? The 100 level on the US dollar index. And so it's fighting to hold it as we speak. We're recording this Thursday, July the 13th. It'll be interesting to me if it fails to hold that 100 level weekend. And to that end, gold performed beautifully, right on cue, surging to the 1960 level as it should. Silver had itself a heck of a day yesterday, up some 4+%, and is now closer to $25 than $24. So a lot to like in the precious metal space. You touched on copper. I have to say, I was reading an article and I mentioned it a bit ago, but RBC says that over $200 billion needs to be spent on new copper mines in the next decade to avoid a 10 million ton deficit by 2035. And man, is that music to my contrarian heart's ears, because you and I have been, pretty aggressively, definitely on my end of it, have been increasing our copper exposure. My biggest and my second biggest position next to Patriot right now is Hannon Metals. I wrote a pretty substantial check. That's a check that, I think in 3 to 5 years will give me 10, 20, 30-fold returns on the low end. I think I'm being conservative. I think that controlling a basin, right, an entire basin of unexplored, never touched copper, silver, gold targets is going to prove very, very fruitful and beneficial. And look, as robust as my position is, I'm going to be adding to that position the remainder of this year. So if any of you are looking for some quality junior explorer copper leverage, I think Hannon Metals is worth doing your due diligence. You and I talked a bit off air, Nick, and you were mentioning some of the bigger names and funds that are getting into the space that are starting to allocate capital into the resource sector. You want to touch on that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned Bravo, which is onto some semi-massive and massive sulfides as well. It's one of the reasons that those shares have been going up, right? Not just PGMs and gold, but increasingly nickel, particularly at depth. The nickel grades have been going up, and of course they have a helicopter EM survey that they flew that the market's waiting for the results of, which I think is going to be what takes shares over that $500 million market cap and over $5 Canadian. And the reason I started talking about Bravo is because it's in Brazil. Their asset is called Luanga, or Luanga probably is proper pronunciation. But about a month ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about two mines in Brazil, one nickel and one copper, that were held in a private equity firm called Appian. I don't know if you've ever come across that in your diligence, but they're a natural resource sort of a private equity firm, and I guess they control these assets. And 2 years ago, they were trying to sell them to Sibanye Stillwater, and Sibanye ended up walking. But flash forward to this year, and they've sold those assets to a SPAC. It's a SPAC that has to do with a Russian oligarch's company, but that's really neither here nor there. The stock is now listed in London, ACG. It's called. I think it's going to end up changing its name to like ACG Electric Metals or Battery Metals or something like that. But they're raising the funds now to get these assets going, right? And it was just interesting to me, that it didn't get a ton of coverage. I mean, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, but I haven't seen it like shared around like you've seen the tech Glencore stuff in your face for the past couple of months, for example. But this was interesting because Volkswagen stepped up the $100 million prepayment for nickel. Stellantis stepped up $100 million in equity purchases. There's another natural resource fund called La Mancha that put in $100 million to buy shares of ACG, and Royal Gold, which is one of the top 3 gold royalty companies, Franco and Wheaton and Royal. They came with $250 million, $250 million in royalty financing, and then there's some pretty big banks involved as well, like Citi and Societe Generale, who are raising a $300 million debt facility. And so this is a $1 billion plus deal, and you've got a good mix, right? These big banks are getting involved. These resource banks are getting involved. The automakers obviously want to be involved. Oh, there was another one. Glencore came with $100 million too, and said that they will process the concentrates into battery grade materials. So a lot of big players involved there, and it speaks to a couple of things. It speaks to the environment in Brazil, which is a good jurisdiction and has been. It speaks to the willingness of these large companies to write big checks, and it speaks to, and we've seen other deals that speak to this, but it speaks to how automakers are having to go, right to the miners now and make deals directly with the miners. And I expect that to continue. You just mentioned that RBC reported, I think it was, about how much copper mines had to come on. Well, you can go down the list if you look at like Benchmark.
Yeah.
minerals research, for example, and see, how many billions need to be invested in lithium and
Nickel.
nickel. Exactly right. So and on down the line. So these deals are going to continue coming, and this one in Brazil to me was sort of a grand kickoff party, right? Of course, we've had the lithium deals in Nevada and Quebec, and you see these. I think Ford wrote a check to some Indonesian nickel players, but this was multiple automakers, multiple banks, and multiple resource conglomerates involved in one deal. And to me, that's sort of a shot across the bow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And look, I hate to sound like, the super optimistic, positive guy every week on the commodity space, but I can't help but look at copper and lithium and nickel and just get giddy, Nick, given the positions that we have in place for ourselves and for subscribers. And then look, on the speculative side of the market, the bargains that still exist. I could care less about some of the positions I have that I personally own that are down 40 and 50% and aren't getting absolutely zero love. I'm buying the heck out of them, right? I'll give y'all another free pick this week that has a good copper exposure. They own 20% of that monster Ajax copper gold project that had its permit declined back in, I believe, 2017. Polish mining giant controls the other 80%, and they appear to be making some really good inroads. There you go. Some really good inroads on advancing the part of the permitting process that complicated, and by complicated, I mean that led to them getting their permit denied, which was one First Nations group that, didn't agree with moving the project forward. It seems like from the whispers that I hear that progress is being made, that the two sides are really, really getting closer to agreeing on a path forward. And the engineering work that was done on that permit application is so thorough that if that First Nations group signs off on advancing the project, there isn't much other opposition. And this is a massive project that, I made a case before that just the 20% interest that Abacus Mining has, that's the company I'm talking about, is worth at least $1 to $1.25 per share with the permit in hand. And part of that reason is Abacus is carried all the way through production. They don't have to spend a penny until this thing goes in production, and then the expenses that are being made to get it through and permitted would be paid back from the production profile. So it's as sweet a deal as exists out there for a junior that has a market cap, and I haven't looked at the bid, but I think it's somewhere around $3.5 million. I'll tell you exactly what that number is right now, because it's top of screen here. Abacus Mining. There you go.
5.4 Canadian.
5.4 Canadian. So, I wrote a check in the last financing. I bought a couple of million shares, and I'm looking to add to that. And is it a lottery ticket? Sure. Is it a lottery ticket that I think, doesn't drop below the 3 cents that I paid and a 5 cent warrant that I got? Yeah, I'm pretty confident in that as well. But, that's one of those, again, speculative plays that really isn't getting much attention in the markets, trading at 4.5, 5 cents on a regular basis. You could buy almost as much as you want right now at those levels. In the copper market that I see developing, Nick, I think that stock with the permit in hand could see its share of that project bought out at a significant premium. And I'm not talking just 10 baggers. I'm talking slightly more than that. So, I mean, there's two excellent speculative earlier stage names, right? Abacus, more speculative just because they only own the 20%, and that's really their main asset. On the Hannon front, I think there's a basin full of copper, gold, silver discoveries waiting to be made, and I can't wait till the permitting is moved forward and advanced for Hannon in Peru, and they start to drill out some of these targets. I think it's going to be off to the races. So yeah, love what I'm seeing for the commodity bull market setting up here for latter half of this year and 2024.
Yeah, I see these names catching bids, even bigger ones. I just take a scroll through from time to time. The Ivanhoe's, et cetera, even the Ivanhoe Electric, which I've been watching out of the corner of my eye, they all continue to catch bids. And so despite copper having been below 4 and despite recession concerns, some of these copper stocks have held up really well.
Couldn't agree more. Thoughts on the precious metals move, in response, obviously, to the weaker dollar, but technically, gold to me looks really, really good, right? We talked about support and not breaking support when it dropped below the $1,900 level, and how it recovered and how well it closed and bounced back from it. Any thoughts there?
I mean, just exactly what we said, that it's
Yeah.
been bullish, that when it's down around 1900, you should be buying and adding to it. I told you I was doing that with GLD the other week when gold was down around 1900. It did technically hold support. It remains technically bullish. And then it got the tailwind of softening dollars and bond yields this week. So I think gold's looking good. And it's held up remarkably well in the face of a year's worth of rate hikes as well. So, the same old sentiment in that the related stocks aren't doing as good, right? I was reading Mr. Brian London this week lamenting about how it's like only the second worst sentiment he's seen in the gold space, with gold doing, relatively well, if not better than relatively well. And I think that'll change eventually. We talked about, at least me and David Erfley did, about, how you don't got to mess around with some of these companies that don't have funding or don't have good management. And you can make a really short list of companies that are well-funded and are in the right part of the Lassonde curve. And those companies are catching a bid. Like, I'm sure I've talked about Artemis Gold on here.
Yeah.
Recommended that in the past couple of months, down around 475. And look, gold went to 1950, 1960 this week, and that stock shoots over $5. And not even on news. Their news this week was that they were taking people out of camp because of the wildfires and slowing activities. They're under construction right now, and then the stock goes up. And it certainly helps that the chairman bought $250,000 worth of shares last week and shows his confidence in the project. But no, gold looks good, and quality gold developers are starting to look better. And you had silver on there. I mean, silver does what silver does. I mean, but these things go in ranges, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if gold pulled back to 1920, 1910 or whatever in the next couple of weeks. These ebbs and flows are part and parcel for just how markets trade for different reasons. And again, you've got a Fed meeting on the 26th, I think it is, where you'll likely see a 1/4 point hike. They might not do two more because of the CPI we got this week, but the market's still pricing in I can tell you exactly what it is because I pulled it up before we started recording. A 92% chance of a 1/4 point hike in 2 weeks.
Let's talk something that is a little trickier for me anyhow. And it's mostly because I don't dabble in the major U.S. indices, but are we out of a bear market in the major U.S. indices market?
I thought you were going to ask about Bitcoin.
Oh, that one's next.
Yeah. It's been really difficult, right? And maybe difficult's not the right word. It's been confusing. The market's a discounting mechanism, of course. And some of the stuff you've heard me say 100 times, right? This yield curve is still significantly inverted. The ISM numbers for manufacturing are in contractionary levels. The conference board is saying a recession's coming in the next year. Now they pushed that out. But all these classic indicators and ones that have been right on, many of the last recessions going back 50, 60, 70, 80 years continue to say that a recession is coming. And yet stocks continue to go higher, and they also go higher in the face of not good earnings.
Bad earnings with more layoffs coming.
Negative earnings, in fact. So, we haven't even really started Q2 earnings season. It's kicking off like this week in earnest. You get some banks that report tomorrow, the 14th of July. And I think maybe Pepsi reported this week, and there's been a couple of others. But it's really just early stage in the earnings numbers, and still earnings growth is supposed to be negative for Q2. It's supposed to be flat for Q3, which is obviously 3 months away. And then these are FactSet numbers I'm reciting now. It's supposed to be, marginally higher for Q4 earnings. So these stocks are going up when earnings are going down. And it makes one wonder, what's the reason behind that? I'm not really answering your question. Because I don't have a great answer. For me, I've been doing some selling as these stocks have been going up and building up my cash position. I do still think that we have another leg down. But if you listen to the bulls, if you follow the bulls on Twitter, the Tom Lees of the world, I mean, they're taking victory laps, man. They're putting the fingers in the eye of the bears, and they think they're right. What else did I want to get in there?
You got to talk volatility.
Well, I'll get to volatility in a second. Let me talk about inflation, because inflation means that prices are going up. If you remember, when inflation was transitory, is when the stock market was hitting all-time highs, right? When inflation was at 9%, not when it was at the 3% we got this week. When you have inflation falling like it has been consecutively for the past 12 months, it means that prices are going down, which means that companies, aren't necessarily raking in as much cash either. They're getting lower prices. And so I'm interested to see how that's reflected in these earnings reports. You've also got a potential for reinflation, which I think the Fed is going to be concerned about, and why they're going to hike here at the end of July. I mentioned earlier, you've got oil back at $77. Well, what do you think one of the main inputs to the inflation number is, right? It's oil. And if you've got oil at 3 or 4 month highs, what's the next CPI number going to look like? I have to say, I don't think we're out of the bear market yet. And I'm not a perma bear. Like, I'm not one of these, like Peter Schiff is perma bullish on gold. If earnings were going up, if, ISM numbers were expanding, if the yield curve hadn't been inverted for a year and a half, I'd be more willing to say, yeah, like, we're fundamentally in a bull market. But I don't see, other than a small group of stocks, the reason to be bullish or to allocate significant amount of capital to the broad market indices. Sorry, I sort of tiptoed around that answer there, because I have the FOMO as well. It's like, I've been increasingly doubting myself over the past couple of weeks on this, bearish stance. But the data is the data. The only data point that's going up is the stock price, which I guess is the only thing that matters at the end of the day. And if you don't have a brain, and you're not an intellectual or whatever, you don't, think about and weigh in on this stuff all the time and let it weigh on you. But I do think about it, and I do look at the data. And so anyway, I'm starting to ramble, but price says stocks are going up, obviously. A lot of other data says that they shouldn't be, and that we're not done yet.
I like the answer. I think it speaks to just how complicated it is to navigate the overall indices right now. Volatility plays right into that, right? I know that you had some positions going long volatility and then short at one point. Where do you stand on volatility right now? Because boy, I tell you, the perma bulls that are taking victory laps right now are absolutely rejoicing at the lack of volatility in the space.
Sure. Well, I told you last week that my most recent bet on volatility didn't go well. It's still underwater, and I was saying last week that I didn't know what was going to take the VIX back up. But if you look at it, it's got significantly more upside potential than the downside potential, and yet it continues to sit with a 13 handle on the VIX. You could see it with a 17 handle in short order. But the call buying, again, which is what the VIX is based on, the S&P call buying is still very robust. And so I don't really have an answer for you there. The upside is to 17 in short order. There's not a lot of downside left on the VIX. I mean, it's going to go to single digits? I mean, what's going to happen here, And so, we'll see what induces the next sell-off. But yeah, volatility has been absolutely non-existent for a month and a half, really below 20 since, I'm looking at the chart, since March. I mean, That was it. That was the end of my answer. I have a
Yeah,
good one.
I like it. Let's talk about why everyone's listening in, right? Is it Zuckerberg or Elon, right? I mean, we've now gotten to the point in our social media billionaire bingo card that it looks like a real possibility that Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk might get into an actual cage match. There's even discussions about it happening in the Coliseum of all places. And Mr. Hodge, I know you gotta be somewhat curious of the locale, and given the history, I found it highly ironic, right? If you know your history about the Coliseum and why it was built, and it was meant
Breaded circuses.
yeah, absolutely, right? It was meant to entertain the masses while the very few continue to enrich themselves and continue to plunder and rape and do all the things, right? It's ironic to me that you have two of the richest people on the planet that control two of the largest social media platforms on the planet have gotten to a point where they're talking about, and if you're underage or you don't like profanity, I'll give you 3 seconds to cover your ears. So you just have to cover them for 5 seconds. Ready, guys and gals? It's gotten to the point where Elon is proposing a dick measuring contest and started taunting Mark and saying that he should go ask his wife if she's got pictures of his, right? And so again, it's highly entertaining, yes. Also highly ironic because of the location that they're banding about. And anyhow, any thoughts, any feelings? You got a camp that you're going for?
No, I was thinking, I don't have a dog
the
or
intellectual guy the question, the guy that ponders the data and that's trying to figure out if we're in a bull or bear market because the stock prices aren't matching with the earnings data, and the price PE ratios aren't matching the stock prices. I ask him about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, and that's what makes Bizarro World Bizarro World.
I want to say that alien robot Zuckerberg would. He's got those dead eyes. He's got that, quietness. He's not out there talking shit. Whereas, Musk runs his mouth, and you saw the picture of him shirtless on the boat last year. I have to think that Mark is in much better shape.
There's a picture of Mark floating around training. He looked good.
Yeah, I think Mark would get him. I don't know why this all started though. It's been going around social media for a couple of weeks now, them poking at each other back and forth. Of course, Zuckerberg has launched this new Twitter killer. Everything's a killer these days, right? The Tesla killer, the lithium killer, everything's a killer. We've just adopted that in the nomenclature when there's something new.
And then all those things go much higher. That's what's funny.
Right.
Every time the killer comes out, the thing that's supposed to be being killed surges, right? Tesla having itself a heck of a year. Lithium having itself, a great rebound with, a lot of the equities hitting new all-time highs or close to it anyhow. So, yeah, all of it's funny to me.
I don't know if that's why it started or not, but Facebook, or Meta obviously owns Instagram, and Instagram is launching this new social network called Threads. And I guess they've got in the past week like 100 million people to sign up for it, and think that 200 million is doable. And this is without really like walking it out to the Facebook people. This is just sort of like organic growth in the first week. So anyway, I'm not sure if that's why it started or not, though I will say every couple of months there seems to be, a new Twitter killer, right? Like everyone's going to Truth Social, everyone's going to Clubhouse, everyone's going to Discord, everyone's going to this and to that. And then at the end of the day, it's Twitter, right? Sort of just like there's a new battery. And that's what I was thinking about this week. So sorry, my answer is rambling, but there's going to be a new battery. It's a sugar battery. It's a bio battery. It's an oxygen battery. And then no, we're still just building lithium ion gigafactories. And so, anyway, I think Mark would win. I hope they don't measure their dicks. But certainly it's a distraction, right? And like you said, harkens back to the bread and circuses era when they were stepping on the Roman currency, and it was an empire in decline. And so, certainly very poignant that it could be hosted in the Coliseum. And what gets me is that like these guys have time to do this, to tweet about this. Like Elon Musk is like, oh yeah, tweet like, oh, it could happen in the Coliseum. Like the Italian president's trying to make it happen. And oh, by the way, he launched a new artificial intelligence company this week. It was called XAI, right?
Of course he did.
To do battle with ChatGPT, which he was on the board of. And now I'm just rambling, but he was part of OpenAI. Yeah, he was on the board until like 2018 or 2019 or something like that. Elon Musk I'm talking about. And so now he's got an AI company. So an EV company, a space company, a satellite internet company, a rocket company, and now an AI company. So on the company front, Musk wins, but I still think you'd get punched in the throat by Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, and look, I will pay to see that. By the way, I would take my $100. I've spent $100 on way more frivolous things than seeing Mark and Elon go at it for however long that lasts. I'm supposed to remind you all to go to dailyprofitcycle.com/subscribe to get all of our Elon and Mark insights, as well as some insights on the market, some of our top picks, some of what we're buying, and overall content from a host of excellent editors that cover a number of different sectors. What are we watching this week, Mr. Hodge? I'll start with you.
Well, you mentioned our host of editors, and so I'll just mention Chris Curl, who's been saying that Bitcoin was going to start breaking out. It's above $31,000 per Bitcoin as we record this. He wrote an article this week about how you could benefit from that, not by owning individual cryptocurrencies or tokens, but by owning Bitcoin miners. And one of the ones he was writing about in that article, let me click on it so I get it exactly right, was called TerraWolf, which is actually domiciled in my old stomping grounds of the eastern shore of Maryland. But it was up like 30% today. We record this on Thursday the 13th. And in the past month, it's up from $1.50 to almost $4. And so he's probably feeling better about the crypto market, certainly, than he has been over the past year or so. And he's made a couple of pretty good calls, man.
He has.
The Bitcoin miners that I just announced. But he was also talking about the government lawsuit, the SEC lawsuit against Ripple, whose token is XRP. And Ripple won that lawsuit this week.
Yeah.
It's not a security, I think, is the ruling. Let me make sure I got that right too. Hold on. Anyway, and Ripple doubled like in a day, which he's got in the crypto cycle portfolio. So XRP is not a security. So it won the lawsuit against the SEC. And yeah, the XRP token doubled in a day. So I guess that's what I'm watching, is Mr. Coin get his mojo back in the crypto space.
I will be watching for Bravo Mining, and you alluded to it a bit earlier, but Bravo is broken out, and it's at new all-time highs. I mentioned we helped finance that, and look, subscribers got to do so as well at the 50-cent level. It just touched a new high, 470 today, Canadian. It looks primed to head towards the $10 level. And the reason it's doing that is because there's speculation that not only does it have what's already there is a world-class PGM plus rhodium and gold deposit, the Luanga deposit, right, which is getting a resource makeover right now. We'll have those numbers over the next couple of months. It's going to be robust, and because of the infrastructure advantages that it has and the fact that it's on private land, the permitting aspect and the path forward isn't in question. It's just a matter of how rich can they make what's there. And what appears to be there now is, if this is Luanga and the PGM deposit, there looks like potentially there could be another 8.5 kilometers of strike worth of massive nickel copper sulfides underneath that. And so, if the speculation says if the PGM deposit can rival Chalice's deposit, and I think it can, then the market cap should be north, very much so, of $1 billion based on Luanga. And if we think there's going to be 8.5 kilometers underneath at depth of a similar but richer nickel copper massive sulfide deposit, it's going to get really fun really quick, and $10 before end of year isn't out of the question. I see you, Nick. So that's what I'm watching for. I'm waiting for results from that EM survey. They already alluded to in the last press release that came out this week that initial interpretation suggests many potential targets. And of course, what we want as shareholders, we want those feeder zones. If they can tap into the feeder zones and that survey lights up like a Christmas tree, they have drill rigs already at the site waiting to drill, pending final interpretation of that survey. So it's exciting times at Bravo. I had a fund manager that manages, I don't know, it's quite a bit. It's a couple $100 million. He was asking for ideas. He'd done well with PMET. And, I had mentioned Bravo Mining $150 million ago, right? Market cap wise. And he said he couldn't touch it until it hit $500 million. So I reminded him, well, it's at $500 million now. And I think it's got a pretty damn good shot at doubling here before now in year end. So yeah, Bravo Mining doing what Bravo Mining has done here all year long, executing brilliantly in the field, and it's finally translating into some real share price appreciation. So congrats to those of you and those of us that have been long since the 50-cent level.
Well, they gave you a little taste. So just to add on to that, because I was writing about it today, and they put out news this week. It was, drill results from this phase 2 program, and they were good. Another thing to add there is that this thing hasn't really been drilled below 250 meters, right? And so this phase 2 drill campaign is going down below to 300 meters and potentially beyond. And they're finding increasing nickel grades at depth. They're finding the PGM grades continued to depth. And so that's one thing. But if you read the quote from Mr. Azevedo, he says that, and I'll just read it verbatim, we're encouraged with these drill results, particularly as we await the final interpretation of the recently completed Heli-TEM airborne electromagnetic survey. And then he just throws in this little kicker, right? Where preliminary data interpretation suggests promising anomalies are present. So they already looked at the data and they know what it says. And they're just waiting to put out the final press release with the final interpretation, and then they'll drill it. But I'm pretty sure Simon Mottram has said, who is the president, that lots of people go elephant hunting and they believe they have a herd of elephants.
Simon, who typically, if you know him, tends to be a conservative guy, is as giddy and excited as I've seen any president. And then obviously his history of nickel success, I think his skill set is perfectly suited for making a major discovery at a time where, as we mentioned earlier, we need a whole heck of a lot more nickel and copper, so the timing couldn't be better. So I'm watching that this week. I mean, that has real world consequences for, myself, for you, for subscribers of ours that have been in it since the early days, and then potentially more recent subscribers that maybe got in a couple of dollars share price ago, 100% or so ago. The potential to make some real money there with Bravo. And then, of course, I'm waiting for Patriot to get to drilling again. It started raining a bit out there. I'm hoping that's sustainable, and I'm hoping we get those burn bans lifted so that we can get back to not just the maiden resource estimate, which I already have my mind about where that comes in, but growing that thing and connecting some of these blobs and just proving up the potential scale of this stuff and forcing those major mining companies to come in and buy, through open market purchases, their stake in the company, because it's not going to happen via a financing, not the way that I understand major shareholders, including myself, prefer that to happen. We much rather see it happen in the open market. And, I talked with you off air, Nick, Evan Cranston, who, him and his group are the major shareholders, have a substantial stake. And I would say they obviously have a substantial say as well about the way that that's done. He tweeted as much. He said, no majors coming in and getting a 10% raise when we could go to the market and do 100% flow through, 100% premium on a flow through financing. They're going to have to buy it in the open market. And I think all hell will break loose in the share price when that happens. When Moon? I don't know when Moon, but I know Moon's happening. So I stay content with my shares in the portfolio. And then, every day I do the numbers of when it goes to 20, what's it going to be? When it goes to 30, what's it going to be? All of those are good numbers. So kudos to those of you that are holding strong and weathering the lack of volatility in the stock, because it's just been, frankly, a boring stock as far as share price goes for the last 4 months or so, right? It's been pretty range bound, but in the field, executing brilliantly, adding lots and lots of value. There's a lot more to have there. Anything else to add, Mr. Hodge?
No, it will be consequential. Both Bravo and Patriot. I think Bravo is the single biggest check I ever wrote. I've written multiple checks that in aggregate were bigger at other companies, but at Bravo, 50-cent financing was the biggest check I ever wrote. And it speaks to share structure, right? I wasn't getting a warrant.
Yeah.
And so I had to, if I wanted more shares, I had to buy them then, which I did. And that's, one of the things that allows a stock to have a good structure, right? And then perform well in the capital markets when people aren't selling because they know they have warrants to exercise. So it's good to see things line up and work for the right reasons.
Couldn't agree more. I am Gerardo Del Real along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 227th episode of Investing in Bizarro World, our weekly therapy session. I hope y'all are staying warm out there. I hope y'all are staying hydrated. I hope you're being kind to each other. Quick reminder to tell the people you love that you love them. Today's the 1-year anniversary of my father passing away. Not to be morbid, but it's all the same. Like I told my brother and sister, he's been dead every day to me. So it's just another day. But every day I take solace in the fact that we had good conversations up until, 2 hours before he passed, and was able to communicate, all of the love and all of the feelings and even some of the negative stuff. And, he went peacefully and happy nothing was left unsaid, right? So I encourage all of you to take a moment and just talk to your people. And I know that resonates right now, Nick, and as always, but anything to add to that?
No, you said stay warm, but hopefully people are staying cool out there because it's hot.
That's it, y'all. Go be kind to each other. Have a good one. Enjoy it. Get outside. Stay warm, stay cool, stay whichever one you prefer.
There you go. See ya.
Bye, y'all.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.